The dark lore of the cat. The link between sight and the cat probably arises from the concept of sympathetic magic. Things of a like nature are mystically connected, like for like. So far was sight linked with the cat in medieval magic that the formula for producing the famous Hand of Glory, a favourite of thieves who wished to be invisible, involved the use of cat's fat. The hand had to be cut from the right arm of a hanged murderer during an eclipse of the moon. The candles which were inserted into the fingers were made from the fat of a black tomcat. From the early 15th century, many occultists were linking cats to witchery. The Italian occultist Antonio Guarnieri wrote of the incubus, the demon which would have intercourse with sleeping women. He wrote that the incubus was often the result of witchcraft, and the demon would assume the shape of a cat. Henri Boguet, the 17th century French lawyer and expert in witchcraft, also wrote that the incubus could appear as a cat. Most believed, however, that the incubus assumed the form of a man, a satyr, or a goat. The liver of the black cat was used in medieval times as part of the ritual of driving out demons from the possessed in the act of exorcism. Black cats were widely believed to attend witches' sabbats. Villagers would often cut off the tails of black cats to stop them from going with their mistresses. Witches and warlocks were thought to worship the devil in the form of a black tomcat. The 16th century German artist Hans Boldon Green made this sexualized woodcut of witches making spells and flying potions. The cat is in the foreground as the standard symbol of witchcraft. Aristotle said that the female cat was highly lecherous. The Egyptians considered it a fertility symbol. In medieval times, the word cat was slang for prostitute. I looked up more of Hans Boldon Green's works, and I think he had a thing for naked witches. His image for witch and leviathan makes me think he had some issues. A witch's true familiar was a demon in disguise and was a gift made by the devil to each witch who joined the diabolical band and attended a sabbat. The most popular disguises for familiars were widely believed to be frogs or cats. As well as an instrument of the devil's whim, the cat was a symbol of heresy because its ability to see in the dark likened it to those in touch with the evil spirits of the darkness. Since the superstition was that the familiar was a demon in disguise, the household pet of anyone suspected of witchcraft would be taken. Few English witch trials omit to mention cats and kittens as familiars. It was common for women to be condemned as witches for having a reputation and keeping a pet cat. Here is a picture of the Belvoir witches who were tried in 1617 in Lincolnshire. Their cat, Rutterkin, was apparently part of the spell they used to kill Lord Ross. They are said to have stolen the Lord's glove, dipped it in boiling water, stroked it over the cat's back, and cast a spell which caused the Lord to take to bed and to die. Witches are supposed to have suckled their familiars from irregular marks upon their body known as witch teats, from which the imp would suck blood rather than milk. Spirits of evil derive energy from blood, you see. A wart or spot or pimple would be sufficient evidence for hanging as a witch during the witch crazes. The trial of the Chelmsford witches in 1579 had evidence about the antics of an unfortunately named cat, Satan, who could turn into a black dog and into a toad, and could speak and suckled on blood. It did not end well for the Chelmsford witches. Here is a picture of Anne Bodenham with a demon cat amongst a whole load of imps. She was hung in 1653 for being able to summon demons and change her shape. She had been maid to John Lamb, an astrologer and cunning man who was stoned to death by a London mob in 1628, being accused of black magic. In Scottish witch trials, it was reported that witches would ride on the backs of cats to sabbats. They would baptise cats as part of their demonic practices, and they would change into cats. In Thurso, a merchant called Montgomery petitioned the sheriff to rid his house of an infestation of cats which spoke among themselves. Before the sheriff got around to it, Montgomery armed himself with a sharp object and killed 2 of the cats and struck off the leg of a third. Shortly after, a local woman named Helen Andrew died and another one drowned. A third lady, Nan Gilbert, was seen to have lost a leg. Another famous cat familiar is Pyewacket, from one of the many trials of Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General. The name of the familiar was important in the trial, as it would be the name of the demon, and it would make exorcism easier. The cat as witch familiar concept was a pan-European one, with much German literature about it. The 18th and 19th century Spanish artist Goya used a cat a lot in his witchcraft imagery. Here is an image of a screeching cat on the back of a snake, grasped by a naked witch riding a winged demon. Here are 2 cats, a skull and a jug in the foreground of witches levitating in front of a horned monster. An unkind musical instrument is the cat organ. There are records of recitals for this instrument in the 15th, 16th and 17th centuries. The organ would contain cats with their tails attached to cords. When keys of the organ were pressed, a tail was pulled and a sound was made. Misericords, mercy seats, are choir stalls in churches. Many medieval ones have interesting carvings on them. In this 15th century carving from a church in Boston, we see jesters holding 2 cats tightly while biting their tails as if they were bagpipes. In a 15th century Misericorde in Diest in Belgium, there is an image of a man throwing a cat. Cat throwing was a common medieval activity, a sport justified by the idea that cats were intrinsically evil, and the throwing of the cat symbolised the killing of evil spirits. In Ypres, in Belgium, in the Middle Ages, cats were thrown from the belfry tower of the Cloth Hall to the town square every spring. The story goes that cats were brought into the Cloth Hall, where cloth was being stored, to keep down the vermin in the winter. In the spring, when the cats were surplus to requirement, they were tossed. There is still a festival of the cat in Ypres on the 2nd Sunday of May, with a parade of cats through the town. Toy cats are thrown from the belfry to the floor below. Cats were burned in Aix-en-Provence as part of the festival of the Eucharist. Prior to the 19th century, this happened a lot. People would gather dozens of cats in a net and throw them onto bonfires. This happened more often than not at midsummer. It was the custom to burn a basket, barrel or sack full of live cats which was hung from a tall mast in the midst of the bonfire. Sometimes a fox was burned. The people collected the embers and ashes of the fire and took them home, believing that they brought them good luck. The French kings often witnessed these spectacles and even lit the bonfire with their own hands. In the Ardennes, they roasted cats alive on the first Sunday in Lent. The cat, which represented the devil, could never suffer enough. Shepherds would force their flocks to jump over the flames to protect them against witchcraft and disease. Maybe fire was thought to be the most effective way of purging witchery and evil. Cats, hares, foxes and snakes were all burnt in calendar rituals, all animals witches were thought to transform themselves into. In Elizabethan England, cats were sometimes adopted as symbols for the diabolical Pope. At the coronation of Queen Elizabeth I, a huge wickerwork effigy of the Pope was made, into which were pushed a number of stray cats. After being paraded through the streets, it was thrown into a bonfire, and everyone pretended that the screams of the cats were the screams of demons in the dying Pope. In the Western Isles of Scotland, there is a ritual called Teg Hearn, thought to have originally been a ceremony of sacrifice to the northern gods. It became in Christian times an invocation of evil spirits. After the ritual, the magician or exorcist would be able to demand from the invoked demons the power of second sight. The ritual lasted 4 days, starting at midnight on Friday, the day of Freya. Black cats were dedicated to the devil and one by one roasted alive on spits in a huge fire. It was said that as the ritual went on, infernal cats would appear and add to the rackets of the cats being tortured. Eventually, the demon king of the cats would appear and grant the gift of second sight. The last of these rituals is said to have been carried out in the 16th century on Mull. When a South Slavonian wanted to pilfer and steal at market, he would burn a blind cat and then throw a pinch of its ashes over the person from whom he was stealing. After that he could take whatever he liked, and the market trader would be none the wiser, having become as blind as the deceased cat with whose ashes he had been sprinkled. This is sympathetic, imitative magic. In Batavia, children would duck a cat in the pond or pool to raise rain. Across England, cats were often bricked into walls of newly constructed houses as a defence against the evil eye and witchery. The corn spirit of the harvest sometimes comes as a cat. Near Kiel, children are warned not to go into the cornfields because the cat sits there. In Eisenach Oberland, they are told, the corn cat will come and fetch you. It goes in the corn. In some parts of Silesia, at mowing the last corn, they say, the cat is caught, and at threshing, the man who gives the last stroke is called the cat. In Lyon, the last sheaf and harvest supper are both called the cat. About Vesoul, when they have cut the last corn, they say, we have the cat by the tail. At Briançon, in Dauphiné, at the beginning of the reaping, a cat is decked out with ribbons, flowers and ears of corn. It is called the cat of the bullskin. If a reaper is injured at his work, they make the cat lick the wound. At the close of the reaping, the cat is once again decked out, and there is dance and merriment. Near Amiens, the expression for finishing the harvest was, they are going to kill the cat. And when the harvest was finished, that's exactly what they did. At threshing in some parts of France, a cat was put under the last bundle of corn and flailed with it. The dead cat was then roasted and eaten as a holiday dish. In the Vosges Mountains, the close of the harvest was known as catching the cat. And if the harvest was good, they would say that the cat was fat. And if the harvest was bad, they'd say that the cat was thin. In Batavia, children would duck a cat in a pond or pool to raise a storm. Drowning a cat at sea was thought to bring on a storm, as would imprisoning a cat. On his return from marrying a princess of Denmark, King James VI of Scotland was almost drowned in a terrible storm which came up as if out of nowhere on the North Sea. The ship had to shelter in a fjord. It was thought by him that this storm had been raised by witches who had baptized a black cat and then hurled it into the sea. This concludes my short presentation on the dark lore of cats.